The buzz wasn't loud, but it hit me harder than any shout could have. A faint vibration on the wooden table right beside my teacup. My daughter-in-law's phone, screen lighting up like a whisper. Turned scream. One SMS preview. Just a name, a few choice words, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Gerald. I'm 74 years old. And this is what really happened. I wasn't supposed to see it. I wasn't supposed to understand it, even if I did. That's what they all assumed. That age makes you irrelevant. That gray hair means you've lost your edge. That I'd gone soft in the mind, slow in the senses. But I wasn't. And that message? It tore open a world they thought was hidden. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The kind of afternoon that feels stitched together with long breaths and forgotten seconds. Sunlight trickled lazily through the lace curtains, leaving fragile patterns across the floorboards. The kettle had just clicked off, a hollow sound echoing through my kitchen like a tiny exclamation mark. I poured 2 cups of tea, one strong, one sweet. My ritual, my comfort, and, apparently, my undoing. Elaine, my daughter-in-law, was upstairs taking a call. Her voice had floated down earlier, light, careful, rehearsed. She'd laughed once, a little too high-pitched. A sound I'd learned, over the years, to treat as a red flag. I'd offered to host lunch while my son, Malcolm, was away at a seminar. Elaine had agreed too easily. Almost eagerly. She'd been unusually helpful that morning. Offered to set the table. Brought flowers in a vase I hadn't used in years. Even slipped coasters beneath our cups. My favorite coasters. She had never cared for coasters. Once, she'd mocked me for insisting on them. Life's too short to worry about water rings, Dad. So why now? Why the sudden thoughtfulness? Maybe people change. Or maybe they calculate. Her phone had been left face down when she climbed the stairs. A careless move, or maybe just habit. But the screen betrayed her. Buzz. Buzz. A faint vibration that ran through the wood, into my wrist resting nearby. At first, I didn't look. I swear I didn't. I wanted to respect privacy, to pretend I hadn't noticed. But then, a name caught my eye. Grant. Can't wait till next time. Last night was... And then it vanished, snatched away by the lock screen. The phone returned to stillness. But inside me, nothing was still. I leaned back in my chair. The wall clock ticked steadily. The cat in the corner let out a contented snore. The tea cooled slowly. The house breathed normally, but my chest tightened. That message wasn't meant for Malcolm. And the last time Elaine claimed to be at a wellness retreat had been just last night. When she returned downstairs, her face carried a smile that hovered awkwardly between effort and ease. "Smells amazing," she said, brushing crumbs that weren't there off the placemat. I forced a smile back. "Hope you're hungry." We ate like everything was normal. Chicken pot pie, flaky crust, still steaming, steamed asparagus, green and glistening. She took delicate bites, complimented the seasoning, nodded at the tenderness of the chicken. Her phone buzzed once more, muffled in her handbag this time. She glanced at it, a quick flick of her eyes. Too quick, too careful. Like someone checking whether a door was still bolted. That evening, when the dishes were washed and the lights dimmed, I sat alone in my armchair. The message replayed in my mind on a cruel loop. Not the full sentence, just the fragments I'd seen. Grant, last night, next time. I wasn't sure what I saw, but I knew what I felt. Malcolm worked hard, too hard, late nights, long commutes, endless calls. He loved her with a trust that was almost naive. A blind devotion I envied, a devotion I feared. They'd been married 5 years. No children yet. But dreams. Oh, they had dreams. A bigger house, a backyard, a family. They'd said, when things settle down. But things weren't settling. They were unraveling. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in my study. The lamplight threw long shadows across the desk. My teacup had gone cold, untouched. I held a pen in my hand, scribbling on the back of an envelope. Each word I remembered from that preview, each letter, each punctuation mark. Because I knew, once morning came, she'd clear it. People who cheat rarely leave trails, unless someone watches. The next few days, I played the role of the doting father-in-law. I praised her cooking, even when it was too salty. I let her pick the evening shows, though I detested reality TV. I even offered her my phone charger when her battery dipped low. She laughed, called me the sweetest. Her voice sugary, almost condescending. But I noticed one thing. She never left her phone out again. Not once. Always tucked in her pocket. Always screen side down. She was careful now. Friday morning, I made a choice. If she wouldn't let me see, I'd find my own way. At breakfast, I placed my phone beside hers. Not touching, just close enough. When she rose to fetch more juice, her phone lit up. Another buzz, another name. This one bolder. Miss you already. Same time next week? I moved fast, silent. My thumb clicked my own camera. A quick photo, clear, crisp. The timestamp glowed on the corner. My hand trembled, but only slightly. She returned moments later, humming. She never noticed. I saved the image, not in my gallery, but tucked in a folder named Knitting Patterns on my cloud, a place I knew she'd never look. 2 days later, Sunday lunch. I invited her. I invited a few family friends. Malcolm had come home the night before, exhausted, but happy. He kissed her forehead as he entered. She smiled again, that same wide, practiced grin. I clenched my jaw so hard it ached. The long dining table filled with chatter and clinking cutlery. Stories flowed. Old jokes resurfaced. Laughter bubbled. Elaine leaned across, her hand steady, filling my plate with salad. "Eat more greens, Dad," she said, her tone playful. Her phone buzzed again. She reached for it, paused, our eyes met. For a fraction of a second, something flickered there. Suspicion? Fear. A silent dare. After lunch, I cleared the plates. The clatter of dishes covered my thoughts. They moved into the sitting room, Malcolm's laugh carrying through the hall. I stepped into my study, closed the door softly, opened my phone. 3 photos now. 3 messages. 3 timestamps. I wasn't angry. Not yet. But I was ready. I made copies. 1 backed up on an external drive. 1 printed, crisp and high resolution, sealed in an envelope. On the front, to be opened by Malcolm, if needed. I didn't know when I'd use it, but I knew the time would come, because secrets don't stay buried. Not in this house, not when the walls still remember, not when silence records more than screams ever could. The rain had come lightly overnight. I could smell it in the soil outside the kitchen door. That faint, unmistakable scent of damp earth curling through the screen, like memory. Like something old, pulled forward into the present. It clung to the windows. Beads of water slid slowly down the glass. Not rushing, not heavy. Just a patient descent, like the kind of tears you don't wipe away right away because admitting they're there hurts more than letting them linger. Upstairs, Elaine was humming. A light, airy tune. Off-key, but steady. She always hummed when she thought she was safe, when she believed no one was listening closely enough to catch the cracks between her notes. I leaned against the kitchen countertop, arms folded, eyes on the cup she'd left behind. Her teacup, lipstick mark, half faded at the rim, a faint blush stain where her mouth had pressed, the steam still curling faintly upward, telling me she had left only moments ago. Her phone was nowhere in sight. Of course it wasn't. She'd changed her habits. No more phones left behind on tables. No more buzzing against wood when she wasn't watching. No more screens lighting up like guilty spotlights. But I was still watching. They think we sleep early, we older ones, that after a certain age, our world narrows to crossword puzzles and reruns, to evening medication schedules and polite yawns. They think we slow down, that our eyes blur, our hearing dims, our memories fail. But I have habits they don't know about. One of them, I still walk the hall at night. Always have. It started with Malcolm. When he was a baby, teething and restless, I paced those boards in half-darkness, counted the creaks, and memorized which plank betrayed footsteps. I walked the same hall years later, when my wife's breaths had grown shallow, her hand cool against mine. Those nights stretched long, the boards carrying both grief and prayer. Even now, the creak on the third board is still there. My wife used to joke it was the house's heartbeat. To me, it was the sound of being alive in silence. That night, at exactly 1:42 a.m., I passed by their room. A sliver of light pressed out beneath the door. Thin, sharp, flickering. Not the amber of a lamp, not the glow of a television. Cool, blue, rhythmic. I didn't need to peek. I knew that light. I had lived long enough to recognize its pattern, the restless scroll of a phone screen in the dark. Elaine was awake. The next morning she came downstairs later than usual. Her silk robe trailed softly against the stairs, slippers padding. She yawned into her shoulder, hair loose, eyes just a little too heavy. "Oh, I couldn't sleep," she said casually, reaching for the fridge handle. She didn't look at me when she added, "I was reading." Reading. The word rolled from her tongue like a ready excuse, too polished, too rehearsed. She poured herself orange juice. The glass clinked against the counter. She took a sip without raising her gaze to mine. I stirred my tea, slowly, letting the spoon tap once, twice, against the ceramic mug. The sound sharp in the quiet kitchen. She sat across from me, rested her elbows gently on the table, then checked her watch. Not her phone, her watch. Another small shift. Subtle, but there. Elaine was adapting, which meant she was aware, which meant I had to adapt faster. That day I drove into town. The rain had dried to a dull mist, the roads damp but not flooded. I told her I needed groceries. She barely looked up from her book, or whatever excuse she was pretending to read. But I didn't need groceries. What I needed was help. The corner hardware and fix-it shop smelled of oil and wood dust. Shelves stacked with tools that outlived generations, spare parts that spoke of a slower time. Behind the counter sat Henry. Henry was older than Malcolm, younger than me. A wiry man with hands always busy, polishing, rewiring, adjusting knobs that most people would have thrown away. He repaired radios, old ones, the kind with knobs that clicked, with voices that came through in waves of static and crackle. I leaned against the counter, lowered my voice. "How hard is it," I asked, "to set up a basic monitoring system?" "Sound, mostly. Discreet." Henry looked at me for a long moment, then tapped his pen on the counter. Not surprised, not judgmental, just calculating. By Thursday, I had what I needed. A small recorder. Flat. Black. Magnetic. Battery life. 30 hours. Audio sharp enough to catch a whisper sliding across a rug. It felt cold in my hand when I first held it. Heavy. Not in weight, but in consequence. That evening, when Elaine set her teacup down on the crocheted coaster she always insisted on using, the good one, a gift from her mother, I made my move. Once she left the room, I slid the recorder beneath it. Silent. Invisible. The irony made me smirk. She had mocked me once for being too sentimental about those coasters. Now hers was my listening post. 2 nights passed before anything surfaced. The file was long. Too long. I listened through hours of silence, the shuffle of footsteps across carpet, the hum of the microwave reheating something late at night, the steady tick-tick-tick of the wall clock marking every second of my patience. Then, at last, a voice. Software uneasy. Elaine's. No, I didn't tell him. Of course not. Silence. Then quieter still, her tone edged with strain. He's just always around lately. I'll figure it out. I paused the recording, rewound, played it again, then again. Her voice didn't tremble. It calculated, it dismissed. There was no second voice on the tape, just hers. But she was speaking to someone. Someone who expected secrecy. Maybe Grant, maybe someone else. But the words cut deeper than the name ever could. He's just always around lately. As if I were the nuisance. An obstacle in her carefully arranged life. Not her father-in-law. Not Malcolm's father. Not family. Just a variable to be figured out. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I organized. I opened my laptop, created folders, neat, precise, one for photos, one for audio, one for transcriptions I'd begun making by hand. I labeled them plainly Tuesday, Coaster Audio 1, Texts Grant Set 1. It was becoming a digital trap. But I wasn't the spider. I wasn't waiting to feast. I was the architect. And architects design for collapse. That Sunday, I invited Malcolm to come by early before brunch. Just him. No Elaine. We sat on the porch, the morning light slanting across the wooden boards. I poured him black coffee, strong, almost bitter, the way he had always liked it when he was too young to even pretend to enjoy it. He cupped the mug in his hands, let the steam rise against his face. He looked tired, more tired than usual. "Work all right?" I asked gently. He nodded, but it was slow, thoughtful. "Yeah, it's Elaine that's been stressed lately. I don't know. She's been weird." He sighed. "Last week, she snapped at me for nothing, said I wasn't listening, that I was too close to home. Whatever that means." He rubbed his forehead with the heel of his hand. "I love her, Dad. You know I do. But sometimes it feels like she's talking to ghosts." I placed my hand gently over his, looked him in the eye. "She might be," I said softly. And that was all. No more. Not yet. That evening, when Elaine dropped her scarf by the door and bent to pick it up, her phone slipped out of her pocket. It hit the floor with a muffled thud. I didn't move, didn't breathe, but my eyes saw it. The notification lighting up the top of her lock screen. "G. See you Thursday." The heart burned into me like a brand. She snatched the phone quickly. Too quickly. Her smile stiffened, then returned too bright. I didn't react. But inside me, something hardened. Patterns. That was the key. Tuesday. Thursday. Bookends to betrayal. The next day, I upgraded. I borrowed Malcolm's spare laptop. Told him I wanted to look at old photos, maybe scan some for the family album. He smiled. Trusted, handed it over. And on that laptop, I synced the folders, photos, audio, transcripts, a duplicate of every truth I had collected. Now, if anything happened to me, if my memory failed, if my hands faltered, if my heart simply stopped, the evidence would live on. Set to send. One click. Elaine didn't notice a thing. How could she? She was too busy planning her Thursday volunteer shift, too busy arranging smiles that no longer reached her cheeks, too busy underestimating me. They say old age brings wisdom. Maybe, but I know it brings something sharper. Time. And time is the cruelest blade of all. The sound hit before I even registered what it was. A sharp little ping. Not loud, not jarring. Just a clean, short tone that carried too far in the stillness of the hallway. It wasn't my phone. I never kept notifications set that bright. And Malcolm's device? Safely zipped away in his work bag. I'd seen him tuck it there earlier with his usual carefulness. Elaine was in the shower, which meant her phone had slipped up again. It sat alone on the hallway table. Face up this time. Its screen glowed like a secret that wanted to be seen. The case had peeled slightly at the corner. Worn, chewed almost, like it had been nervously handled too often. I didn't move at first. My hand held my tea, still warm, the porcelain anchoring me while my mind ran ahead. Then my eyes caught the preview. It didn't vanish fast enough. Grant, you always smell like cinnamon. Can't get you out of my head. No emojis this time, no playful initials or coded symbols. Just raw words. Lusty. Loose. The kind of words that don't belong in any marriage. My throat tightened. I hadn't even taken a sip of the tea. I stepped back into my study, closed the door softly behind me, sat down with the weight of it pressing into my chest. The laptop hummed as it woke. I opened my folders. Synced. The screenshots collection refreshed. I added a new one, SMS Grant. Thursday, 7 a.m. .png. I stared at the file name for a moment. Each word in that string meant nothing on its own, but together they spelled betrayal. Then I opened a new text document. I typed slowly. Deliberate. If anything happens to me, this file goes to Malcolm. All evidence attached. Reviewed twice. No edits made. Just truth. It wasn't drama. It wasn't paranoia. It was protection. That afternoon, I sat through her lies again. Elaine smiled as she plated salmon over quinoa, her presentation neat, practiced, like she was curating a magazine spread. Her voice was bright, lilting, as she launched into talk about community projects. She held up a flyer she might help design. Lines of text, stock photos of people holding hands in circles. Her words were carefully arranged, but her tone? Hollow, empty. She glanced at me while pouring water into glasses. Her eyes sparkled, but only in the way glass does when light bends, sharp but without warmth. She asked if Malcolm and I had bonded lately. Her smile widened, as though the question itself was casual. I told her yes. She looked briefly uncomfortable. A flicker. Small, but real. Later that evening, I retrieved the tool I'd ordered online. A signal sync cable. Thin, black, harmless to the eye, but designed for temporary pairing. All I needed was 30 seconds. That moment came after dinner. She left her phone charging in the kitchen wall port. Steam from the dishwasher fogged the glass cabinets, leaving hazy shapes behind the doors. The living room carried her voice, soft laughter, as she chatted with Malcolm about the day. I walked in quietly, like a man who had forgotten a dish towel. An old trick. Nothing suspicious. I slid the cable in. The connection was instant. My old tablet flashed once. Paired, pulling data. I didn't linger, didn't dare. I moved carefully, like I was lifting glass. Copied the logs, closed the tablet, unplugged, didn't access the files yet, didn't need to. The harvest was enough. Processing could wait. But that night, something strange happened. At 2:17 a.m., while the house was still, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. Plain, forgettable. Subject line, "Thought you should know what she said." My breath hitched. It was a forward. From Grant, sent to someone else, but it mentioned me. I clicked. The words on the screen cut sharp. He's always lurking, watching like some antique watchdog. I swear, if he gets in the way again, I'll scream in his face. Malcolm won't care. He's spineless where I'm concerned. I just need a few more weeks. Then the house is mine. The account's already set. Don't worry, it's all falling into place. I sat frozen. My hands were still, but my chest rose fast, uneven. So this was never just about lust. It wasn't just stolen kisses or hurried nights in some condo. It was about extraction, leverage, control. She wasn't just cheating. She was building an escape plan, one cushioned by property, by inheritance, by deeds that still carried my name. The next morning, I dressed early, drove into town. The bank lobby smelled of polished wood and faint coffee. I sat across from Victor, the branch manager, a man I'd known for 20 years. I didn't explain everything, just leaned forward and asked, "Have there been any recent authorization requests?" Joint, regarding the house, or the trust. He frowned, adjusted his glasses. "Nothing recent, Mr. Harrow, but—" He paused, scanning. "Last month, there was an inquiry tied to your late wife's trust. Someone called in, claimed to be a legal representative asking about dormant clauses." The words landed like stones in water. "Did she leave a name?" I asked. He checked the notes on his screen. His brow twitched. Elaine Harrow. The silence between us was heavy. I nodded slowly. That day, I signed 3 documents. First, a revocation of shared access to the house title unless approved by both Malcolm and me in writing. Second, a lock on the transfer of any funds from my private savings account. No exceptions. Third, a notarized freeze on the inheritance clauses from my wife's trust, retroactive to the day she passed. Each stroke of the pen felt like drawing a blade across a rope she thought she had tied tight. Victor watched me carefully as I handed the papers back. "Something wrong, Mr. Harrow?" he asked. I met his eyes. "Number something's finally getting right." That evening, I scanned the documents, saved them in a new folder. Trust freeze / Doc Lockhouse, record number 2190.pdf. Savings hold. Victor stamped .pdf. Each stamped, each date marked, each backed up twice. Elaine didn't know yet, but something in her shifted that night. She brewed tea with too much sugar, checked her phone more often. Her words tumbled out faster, scattered, unanchored. Her smile didn't linger anymore. It flickered, then faltered. The walls were beginning to close in. 3 nights later, I finally opened the full sync. Messages, images, deleted texts, location history. The files unfurled like a confession. She'd been to a condo, twice this month. A place Malcolm didn't know about. The lease under the name Grant L. Her deleted photos betrayed more. One mirror selfie, bathrobe, champagne glass raised. Her grin sharp, her eyes half-lidded. The caption written, but never posted. Some nights, you get everything you want. Others, you just take it. She had no idea the cloud didn't forget. The final piece arrived hidden. Buried in her downloads folder was a PDF. Its name plain, bureaucratic. Contingency transfer, prior authorization.pdf. Inside, a document pre-filled with my name. Her signature already written. A blank line left open for a witness. She'd been preparing to take. And if I hadn't been watching, she might have succeeded. I didn't tell Malcolm. Not yet. He wasn't ready. But I was. And soon I'd show her the one message she never meant to send. The one she sent by trying too hard to hide everything else. The speaker sat in the center of the dining table. Small, wireless, innocent-looking, no bigger than a teacup. But it wasn't turned on for music. It was waiting. That Sunday the family gathered for brunch. Elaine wore pale blue, a dress that floated softly when she walked, like calm water pretending to ripple with ease. Malcolm stood at the head of the table, carving the roast with practiced care. His brow furrowed slightly as he worked, always focused, always careful not to let the juices spill. My niece Sarah had arrived earlier with a basket wrapped in a towel. Homemade biscuits, still warm, the smell of butter and flour rising like a promise. Voices wove together around the room. The kitchen echoed with the metallic scrape of serving spoons. The living room held bursts of laughter, the easy kind that floats without asking permission, the kind that makes a house sound alive. It was perfectly ordinary. Every sound, every smile, every motion, until it wasn't. Elaine leaned across the table with the gravy boat in her hands. Her nails were painted a shade lighter than her dress. She smiled, polite, practiced. "Careful, it's hot," she said, her tone lilting. I nodded once. Hot things often spill when shaken. Her smile twitched. Just slightly, but I saw it. A hairline crack in porcelain. I waited. Waited until halfway through the meal. Until plates were mostly empty, cutlery moving slower, forks clinking only occasionally. Waited until conversation drifted into softer notes, the kind of talk people do when they're full, when they lean back with coffee, when the energy dips and silence becomes easier. That was the moment. Without a word, I tapped my phone once beneath the table. The speaker lit up. A soft glow. A tiny sound. The room stilled. Elaine's fork froze mid-air. She blinked at the small device. "What's that?" she asked, her voice thin, light but tight around the edges. I didn't answer. Instead, the first recording played. He's always lurking, watching like some antique watchdog. I swear, if he gets in the way again, I'll scream in his face. Malcolm won't care. He's spineless where I'm concerned. The words poured into the room. My room. Chairs shifted. Sarah lowered her eyes to her plate, suddenly busy with crumbs that weren't there. Malcolm froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. His jaw tightened. Elaine's face drained of color. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Then the next clip followed, softer, sharper. "Just need a few more weeks. Then the house is mine. The account's already set." The last syllable hung like smoke. Elaine pushed back her chair abruptly, the legs scraping against wood. She stood too quickly, hands braced on the edge of the table. "Turn it off!" she snapped. This is... Her voice cracked in the middle. Malcolm's voice cut through, low and tight. "Elaine, what is this?" Her breath caught. Her hands trembled against the tablecloth. She looked at me, not with apology, with panic. You can't just... This is illegal." I folded my napkin slowly, placed it beside my plate with care. So was impersonating a legal representative and pre-filling a false authorization document. Her chest rose fast, shallow. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. The room had gone silent. Even the clock seemed to hesitate before ticking again. Then, as if timed for effect, Her phone buzzed against the wood. Every head turned. The screen lit up. "Grant, we need to talk." "He knows." The glow of the notification cut through her facade more than my words ever could. Malcolm stood, slowly. His chair groaned against the floor. "I think," he said quietly, "we should step outside." His tone was steady, almost too calm, the calm before storms. Elaine reached for his arm, desperation spilling now. "Please, Mal, you know I was under pressure. He's been watching me like a hawk. He's twisting things." He stepped back, his eyes fixed on her. "Number. You've been twisting things." Sarah stood gently, as though unwilling to make the moment louder. She collected a few plates, carried them silently to the kitchen. Elaine sank back into her chair, her hands trembling against her lap. Her pale blue dress looked suddenly drained of color, like fabric left too long in the sun. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a small envelope, placed it gently on the table in front of her. Inside, printed screenshots, message logs, location data, one bank inquiry transcript. "Everything's time-stamped," I said calmly. "Duplicated, forwarded." She didn't touch it, didn't even look down. Malcolm didn't shout, he didn't curse. He simply turned toward her and asked one question. "Why?" Her voice trembled, barely above a whisper. "I felt invisible. You were always working. Your dad, he watches, but he never talks." Her eyes darted once toward me, a flash of resentment, a flash of shame. "And Grant," she whispered, "he listened." Malcolm's face hardened, his tone cracked like ice. "He used you." She shook her head weakly. "Number, we used each other." And there it was, the bare truth. Ugly, shallow, final. The next morning, her suitcase stood by the front door. No words written on it, no tag attached, just silence packed into a hard shell. She didn't look at me when she left, didn't say goodbye. Malcolm didn't say much either, just one soft sentence. "Thanks, Dad." That was enough. An hour later, after the echo of the door had faded, I unlocked the final document in my files. Inheritance Adjustment Clause, final. Signed, notarized, witnessed, Elaine's name, removed. Malcolm, sole beneficiary. The house? Now locked under a dual clause. It couldn't be sold, borrowed against, or transferred without both of our signatures. She hadn't just lost her leverage. She'd lost the board entirely. That evening, I sat with Malcolm in the study. We didn't talk much. Words would have felt like intruders. We just watched the clouds drift past the window, shadows sliding slowly across the lawn. He looked older, lines deeper around his eyes. I suppose I did too, but lighter somehow, because sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it doesn't roar or burn. Sometimes it's a quiet subtraction, a removal, a silence that says, "You had your chance. It's over." The house was quiet again, but not empty. Silence had returned, not the anxious kind that buzzes in your chest, not the sort that makes you feel like something terrible is still waiting in the corners. This was a different silence, the kind that follows a storm once the thunder has rolled away. Rain tapped gently on the eaves outside, a steady patter that washed the air clean. The morning light spilled through the curtains, soft, forgiving. It didn't feel accusing anymore. Elaine was gone. She didn't contest the evidence, didn't argue with the document trail, didn't try to spin the truth even when the walls closed in around her. She had always been good at talking, at bending words, at making her lies sound like truths worth believing. But this time, The files and the recordings left her no air to breathe. She packed in a single night. Her suitcase wheels rolled softly across the wooden floorboards, their sound sharp to me because I knew I would never hear them again. On the kitchen counter, she left a single note. "Tell Malcolm I never meant to hurt him, but I also never felt seen." Her handwriting was careful, almost elegant, as if neatness could soften the cruelty. She didn't leave a forwarding address. I didn't ask for one. In the following weeks, life began to slip back into rhythm. Malcolm adjusted slowly. He still worked, but his hours were shorter, his evenings quieter. More often than not, he'd come home early, sit on the porch with me as the sun fell low. We didn't always talk. Sometimes we just sat there, him nursing a cup of coffee, me with my tea, staring out at the yard as the wind moved through the trees. He wasn't ready to put it into words, but he stayed. And sometimes presence speaks louder than conversation. That mattered. 3 weeks after she left, an envelope arrived in the mail. Not an email, not a text, a letter. The paper was cream-colored, folded neatly, with no return name. But the handwriting was hers. I unfolded it at the kitchen table. The house was still. I read the words once, then again. "You won. You always watched, always knew. I'll never forgive you, not for exposing me, but for waiting. You could have stopped me earlier. You wanted it to break. You needed it to. I wonder what that says about you." Her words scratched across the page like claws. I set the letter down. The kettle whistled faintly in the background. I let it scream a little longer before turning it off. Then I slid the letter into the thick envelope where I kept the other evidence, filed it beside screenshots, transcripts, documents. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. Because in a way, she was right. I had waited. But I waited for a reason. Because Malcolm would never have believed half-truths. Because suspicion without proof only builds resentment. Because sometimes the truth has to land like a falling beam, sudden, undeniable, crushing. Some betrayals, I knew, had to be lived all the way through before they could be buried. And yes, I had waited. I had let her dig her own pit. Because when it caved in, there would be no way out. A month after her departure, I cleaned the guest room. The bedsheets smelled faintly of her perfume, floral, cloying, still lingering even after weeks without her presence. I opened the closet. On the top shelf, folded in a corner, was her scarf. The blue one she always wore when she wanted to look softer, gentler. The one she had worn to family dinners, charity events, days she wanted approval without having to earn it. I held it for a moment. The fabric was smooth beneath my fingers. Then I folded it carefully, placed it in a box with her other forgotten things, a hairbrush, a half-used bottle of perfume, a book she never finished. I closed the lid, taped it shut, wrote on the top in clear letters, "No return." Malcolm asked me once, quietly, when the air felt heavy with unsaid words, "Do you think she ever loved me?" The question hung between us like smoke. I didn't hesitate. "She loved being loved," I said. "That's different." His eyes lowered, and he nodded faintly. He didn't respond, but he didn't disagree. Later, I restored the old photo of my wife and me to the mantel. For years, Elaine had replaced it with a sleek silver frame, one of her and Malcolm, polished, staged, all surface. Now the silver frame was gone. The photo of my wife and me stood again where it belonged. The balance had returned. Some evenings, when I passed the dinner table, I noticed the chair she always chose. Not the head of the table, that would have been too obvious, but not the far end either. She sat close to the center, near influence, near power, never leading, but always reaching. That was her role, close to control without ever fully holding it. And now, the chair sits empty. The inheritance was secured, the trust locked down. Malcolm and I sat together, pen in hand, signing the final amendment to the clause. It read, "In the event of future partnerships, all additions to this household must be reviewed jointly and protected against duplicity." Those were Malcolm's words, not mine. But I nodded when he suggested them. He smiled faintly as his pen lifted from the page. The kind of smile that doesn't come from victory, but from understanding the cost of what had been avoided, or perhaps what had finally been lost. I don't check Elaine's social profiles anymore. I don't need to. The last time I did, weeks ago, she had posted a single quote. "Be careful who you trust. Even quiet people watch." I chuckled when I saw it. Even in her absence, she left behind a line that pointed back at me. Yes, even quiet people watch. My house is quiet now, but not empty. It's steady, ordered, clean. The shadows that once lingered in the corners no longer feel like threats. They've thinned, softened, turned into nothing more than ordinary dark. And the speaker. I unplugged it. I don't need it anymore, because the truth has already spoken. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud. It isn't fire. It isn't punishment. It's subtraction. It's removal. It's leaving the other person alone with everything they tried and failed to control. That's all the revenge they need. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments.